Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 150. And because Netanyahu is in the United States, we're going to talk about Israel. Just as a reminder, what these podcasts are all about is just basically me talking. What I used to do in class every day, I would just sort of take a headline out of current events and just begin the class discussing it. And the reason why I would do that is because I knew that most students either didn't know or were sort of, they were given a prepackaged interpretation of how they should think about current events. And so I would throw things out there to try to get people to think about solutions. In other words, it's not about choosing a side, like which side is right and which side should you choose by using guilt or some sort of arbitrary standard of morality, but basically by getting them to understand that the priorities of the world may not necessarily be their own personal priorities, what is important for them, what they need to address in their life now, as opposed to putting it on hold and addressing the issues that someone else told them that they need to address. Anyway, so that's basically all I'm doing. I guess sometimes it might sound like I'm doing more than that, but really that's all I'm trying to do because, what I personally do, I never really discuss, right? Aside from the fact that I, let other people figure out what they want to do, but I don't necessarily share my own personal choices, what I plan to do. Even on my Sunday sermon podcast episodes, I don't really come with a conclusion like, everyone should do this because I do this. And sometimes I will share some of the choices and decisions that I made, but you know, I rarely do that. And if I do share something, it is only as an example. Like you could do something like this, okay, and it turns out fine. All right, so Netanyahu is here in the United States. Is he a war criminal or not? Should we let him speak or not? Everyone has their subjective point of view. Obviously, some world court basically labeled him as a war criminal. And interestingly enough, that world court was the same court that recognized Israel as a legitimate country. So if you're going to recognize one, then you might want to recognize the other. But anyway, he came to the United States and he addressed Congress, which is kind of interesting, right? And a lot of people would say that he addressed Congress to give a speech for whom the main beneficiary is himself. And so Thomas Massie, a representative from Kentucky, he said he will not be attending what he called a war rally. Very interesting choice of words, but that is essentially what it is. Some people have said that as long as the war continues, Netanyahu stays out of prison. As soon as the war is over, then he has to serve his time in prison as determined by an Israeli court, not the world court, but an Israeli court. So him coming to speak to Congress is kind of a spectacle. I didn't watch it because I really don't care. And plus, I really don't like the guy. And it's hard for me to listen to people who I know are basically talking out of both sides of their mouths or just basically misrepresenting or simply fabricating straight up information. I would just much rather listen to summaries or little clips of their speech, but I already know essentially what he'll say. It's what all politicians say, a lot of subjectivity to support whatever it is they want people to do, rah, rah. A lot of people, in case you didn't know, a lot of people sat out that uh, address to Congress. In other words, a lot of people who are members of Congress decided not to go. And so you wouldn't know this because there were a lot of people who filled the seats, right? There were no empty seats. And the way they do that is they get other people to sit and fill in those seats, probably people who wanted to listen to him. Um, and then they get to sit in those congressional seats. But if you're going to fill those seats, then why does it have to be in Congress? I mean, just choose a stadium, go to an indoor conference hall, you know. So it's all about appearances, right? So most people don't realize that a lot of Congress chose not to attend, and so it's for appearances. Oh, look, it's a packed house here in the United States. Everyone showed up in the government, and they're all applauding him. They're, you know, basically falling over each other to shake his hand when he walks in, giving him standing ovations, blah blah blah. And so and so the impression is that everyone in Congress is supporting this dude, except for the one woman who has the sign, who held up a sign the whole time, war criminal. You know, I think she's part of the squad, you know, that AOC is part of. And anyway, so there are, this is what I know about, you know, this whole situation in Israel. And it's not very detailed, but this is what I know. Everyone has their side of the story, right? So there are a lot of subjective perspectives on what's going on in Israel. We only know a couple at most, a couple, all right? A couple is two, right? So that's basically what most people know, one or two views of what's going on in Israel. Some people are saying, well, I want to be different. I want to be informed. And so they go into history. Well, the historical story that a person wants to share with others really relies on the starting point. And this is true for pretty much any narrative that you create. And I talked about narratives yesterday. So your starting point, where you are going to start your story, really does determine a lot. And so who was there first, right? This becomes a very important part of constructing a historical narrative or story. So depending on where you start your story, that person will believe that they have a stronger position, right? There's more justification, there's more right to live in that land. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because Putin, everyone was laughing at him when he started the story about Ukraine, I don't know, hundreds of years ago, or 1,000 years ago. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And so it was to sort of convey and let people know, hey, Russia has been in control of this area for a very, very, very long time. And so that's pretty much what everyone else does. And yet, because so they weren't laughing at his storytelling, they were laughing at him because they didn't like him. The reality is that everyone does it, right? This is where, you know, that person hit me first, or that person screwed me over first, right? And so whenever we even do talk about a personal beef that we have with someone else, right, the starting point is really important, right? So what happened before that starting point? What's the history before that? What's the context of that? And so sometimes it's really, really important, and other times maybe it wasn't. As in, like, you didn't know that person before. This is when I met the person. But even then, sometimes the historical background can play a part. So every narrative suffers from that starting point phenomena. Then you see a lot of people leveraging death, right? How many people were killed by so and so? Which side killed how many people as compared to the other side, right? So you have this leveraging of death. People love doing that. And a lot of people would like to say how everyone hates everyone else, right? So everyone on this side of the border, they hate everyone on that side of the border. And, you know, this focus on hate justifies a lot of the killing that goes on. Well, see, they hate us anyway, so it doesn't matter. Very typical, you know, war propaganda talk, right? You want to dehumanize your opposition. So no one feels bad about killing all those little kids, right? And so you're going to focus on the hate to justify and sort of to downplay a lot of the positive emotion that you might feel. So these are great emotional arguments and points for people to make who don't live there, right? So maybe you know people, like I just had a conversation with someone who knew someone who lived over there, uh, but then that also serves as bias, right? So that person lives there, they clearly have a subjective point of view. They're going to feed you that subjectivity. And of course, because you love that person, then that subjectivity becomes your bias. All right. So, but what about the stories you don't hear? And you may recall that when I would teach race theory, and because to talk about the United States, it's kind of close. A lot of people already have a lot of stories they have prepared, ready to share with everybody else to try to persuade them, to persuade the rest of the class to agree with them that I'm wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say in class that I bet that this dynamic happens all over the world. Let's go to a place of the world where everyone supposedly hates everybody else, and let's go to Palestine. And so everyone sits up and they say, "Oh, we're going to talk about Palestine." And so the way we hear it today is that a lot of people, if not everybody in Israel, hates everyone who's Palestinian. All the Palestinians hate the Israelis, and that's why we have all this conflict and war and violence and suffering, etc. And so I would say, all we know is what other people tell us. But I bet if we went over there, we would see people in love with each other, right? It's not that they all hate each other, but the Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, right? So you see someone on the other side and you're like, wow, I'm smitten. And you fall in love, right? So I bet you would find lots of people who are in that kind of situation, but because of the cultural, political propaganda, it's frowned upon. It's not really talked about. You have lots of problems as a result. Okay. It's sort of like, what interracial dating used to be and relationships used to be here in the United States, right? And so as soon as I said that story, a student raised her hand and she said that her father was Palestinian and her father's business partner was Israeli. And so they were in business together, right? Which implies that they had mutual trust, there was mutual cooperation, which also says that the average everyday person on the street, if they had to choose between hate or cooperation, they would rather choose cooperation than hate. Hate is exhausting. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's really exhausting. It takes an emotional toll on your body, on your mind. What I also know is that without the United States funding the war would have to end, right? All the weapons, money, and all this other kind of stuff, right? Because you got to imagine it's a citizens' army, right? National Guard type thing. So if all of the people are fighting the war, then who's working in the stores? Who's keeping the factories if they have factories? Who keeps all of them open? Well, you got to pay people to come and work there. So where's that coming from? You see, and so you have all of these other issues that without the United States funding it, then the war would have to end, right? Because you're going to have to choose either fighting or maintaining your economy. Right. The same happens in the Ukraine as well. There is no industry left in the Ukraine. And so basically, the United States is giving welfare to everyone in the Ukraine. So they would have to come to the table and talk instead of using force, right? If you gave people a choice, hey, do you want to be dying in a foxhole tomorrow or in urban fighting, or do you want to talk peace? And 9 times out of 10, the average person, knowing what it really is like to be in war, they would choose peace, right? They would say, okay, let's have a conversation. Now, anything that I would choose, any choice that I would make for them would be problematic. It's problematic because it's my subjectivity. It's problematic because it does not address everyone's subjectivity over in Palestine, right? It would only benefit some people and not everybody. It would be incredibly a bad solution for some people and incredibly great for other people. So it's extremely problematic, which is why I would not dare to even make a suggestion of what they should do concretely, right? I think they should talk, but what should the agreement be? I have no idea, right? Talking is much better than killing. All right, that's basically what I'm saying. And obviously, if they decide that they want to kill each other, well, then keep my money out of it, right? Do it on your own. And also, don't we don't we care about foreign influence in this country? I thought that was kind of amusing that for at least what 6 7 years we were complaining about Russian influence here in the United States through Putin, through Trump, but we're going to have a leader of another country basically tell everyone in America, this is what you got to do, right? I saw a headline saying that Netanyahu told everyone to stop applauding, which I thought was hilarious, right? Stop applauding. I'm talking to you. Stop interrupting me, right? This whole anti-Semitism thing too is a red herring. Okay, it's like crying racism. Really, I mean, who really is an anti-Semite? Really, seriously. I mean, do we even know what a Semite is? You know, at this point, Semite is just basically taken to understand to mean Jew, and that's not actually the correct definition, right? So no one cares who what a Semite is. We're just talking about anti-Jewish sentiment. But again, as I said, it's a red herring because no one really hates every single Semite that they've ever met. You know, it's not really what we're discussing here. And plus, my own position, is it anti-Semitic to advocate for peace, to save lives, everyone's life, right? Including Semites, right? I mean, come on. To advocate for peace cannot be anti-Semitic. So once you start looking at it that way, then you realize that anti-Semitic, the way that term is being used is you are anti a certain policy, you are anti a certain choice, but it doesn't have much to do with the actual people who live there. Now, the media is supposed to tell us, right? I forgot, skip something, right? And so is it anti-Semitic to advocate for peace, which means that we're not going to have drafts, right? So apparently they're drafting Orthodox Jews now, all right, because they were like, we're not into this war, we don't support it, so you can't draft us. And they were like, no, we're drafting you. And so they're basically dragging them away. And it's kind of weird, right? Because then you see coerced soldiers, soldiers who are forced to fight, make very bad soldiers, okay? Especially when it goes against their fundamental beliefs, right? So you're going to end up killing half of your recruits because they refuse to do what they're told, depending on the level of their faith, right? And so to be, so which Jews am I going to be be against by advocating for peace? Clearly, there are many people who are of the Jewish persuasion who are also pro peace. Now, the media is supposed to inform us of all of these things, but they're all propaganda, right? People are free to protest, but if they destroy property, they should be forced to pay for everything. No one is ever really arrested. No one is ever caught. I saw a video of some of them getting, tear gas, but come on, that's not. It's not the same thing. They destroy property. They leave all their garbage there, and they just show up at the next protest. You know, someone is paying for all of their travel expenses and their hotel. Like before this was, made known to me, I thought, oh, these are people who on their own dime, right, with their own money, are traveling there and protesting. So that means that they have to take off from work, they have to spend all the money for the travel, they have to spend all the money for hotel, and that's expensive, right? My family doesn't even go on a lot of vacations, if at all, because it's expensive, right? So what you realize is that for many, if not nearly all of those protesters, it's their job, right? They're paid to do it, right? Wait for the bat phone to ring and where am I going now to protest, right? So whether it's BLM, whether it's, what is it? So that's Black Lives Matter. What is oil? Just stop oil. It doesn't matter. They're on call for whatever protest need that you have. So who pays for it? No one really asks, right? I saw a video of them being bussed in, right? And I saw a previous video. I forget what the other thing they were protesting was. They're always protesting something. It's always the same people too. And they're staying in very posh hotels too. So this is their job. And I guess they're paid very, very well. For what purpose? For generating some more emotional responses like, oh, I hate them even more. I doubt very much that they even really care. They are paid to pretend. They're actors, basically, violent actors. A quick note, and I've mentioned this before, but when we give another country aid, that country takes some of that money to lobby here in the United States. And so basically, we're paying other countries to come and bribe and influence our own politicians here. Um, Now you got to ask yourself, what's the point of all these protests? For all this vandalism, is it for Gaza really? Like it's going to benefit them? Like what kind of food did you send them? Did you take care of them? Send them books? I don't know. Uh, for a bigger government, for communism, is that's what this is for? And my theory is that it is not what you think it is. And ultimately, I think the goal is for bigger government, for more spending. Washington had warned us of entangling alliances. Weaker countries are going to take advantage of the fact that they are allied with a bigger, stronger country. And so they're going to even push war and hostilities and rely on the alliance to drag in this far stronger partner so they can be victorious against a very strong enemy. You see it today. You see it happening, right? Iran seems to be the favorite target of Israel. And even if you did have an alliance, it's not a blank check, right? If you're best friend, you say, "Hey, man, I got your back." But then they want to do something stupid like rob a bank. I mean, seriously, are you going to say yes to that? Like you said, you had my back. Come on, it's not a blank check, right? And so a lot of people are just simply pawns being used to further political goals, right? And so a lot of people today will just simply blindly choose a side because for one reason or another, hey, I'm Jewish too, or hey, I'm Palestinian, or hey, I think I should do the right thing, for whatever reason, they're going to choose a side. All right. Now, as I always say in class, you don't have to choose a side. Just do whatever you want, right? So it's really easy for people to take a position when they don't feel the pain of having to pay for that choice, right? But if push came to shove and people said, "What's your position?" Say, "Oh, we got to support X. We got to support side A, or we got to support side B." And they're like, "Oh, okay, well then kick in $1,000." Very few people will hand over the $1,000. They're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, I had plans to go on vacation with that. I had plans to party with my buddies tonight." Yeah, okay, well then do you want to rethink your position? And so that's the thing. So if we actually saw money coming out of our pocket, our checking accounts, to pay for what we think is the right thing, fewer people would have a strong opinion. Okay. And if you are saying, "Hey, I would put out $10,000," well, that's great. Do it. You're free to do that as much as I am free not to. So do whatever you want, believe what you want, say what you want, but you have to pay for those choices. And once people start realizing that there is a cost to these choices, then they have to reevaluate a lot of those choices, right? And so we're functioning under the myth that the government can spend all the money it wants, go into debt as much as it wants, and there won't be any ill effects to us. But nothing is free, right? Those of you who understand the market, none of these choices are free. So if you actually had to start paying for those choices, you would probably look for alternate choices, right? So two wrongs don't make a right, right? So your position might be wrong, and then to fuel and fund that position, you got to tax other people, you got to take from other people. You will not have a good result. So it seems that this cannot last, right? The United States is bankrupt. And so a lot of people seem to say that the sovereign debt crisis of the United States will bring all of this to a crashing end. Obviously, people in power know this as well. And so they're trying to do all these other things to prepare and to make sure that they can keep the game going. But the reality is the United States is bankrupt. Half the world realizes this, and so they're trying to get out of the dollar. We talked about this before with the BRICS Bank, but this might be the only way that it's all going to stop, right? Trump is not going to be able to save anybody, right? His policies do not seem to really include any cutting of government spending. And it seems that even if, just to be fair, it seems that even if he wanted to do that, no one would let him, right? And we saw that last time. So a sovereign debt crisis might be the only thing, right? When the United States cannot pay its debts, when everyone realizes the United States can't pay its debts any longer. And so therefore, no one ever sells anything to the United States any longer. And so the United States has to make the stuff that it wants to consume. And that's going to hurt, right? Because we don't make anything anymore. So anyway, so that's the thing. So as long as we live in this myth that it doesn't cost us anything to protest or to say we have to send more money to this country or that country, the more we live under that false understanding, the faster the sovereign debt crisis will come here to the United States. And so, yeah, so once again, it's this kind of thing. Make your choice, right? We got to get that attitude once again. Make your choice, but you got to pay for that choice as well. And if more people understood this, then we would have fewer protests. We would have less emotional crisis, right? And people would be able to just get on with their lives. That's it for this episode, and I will talk to you tomorrow.